This week's sip, we're going to start out with one of our good friends, Tom Dienhart, longtime national college football writer for BTN.com, the Sporting News, now with Purdue at goldenblack.com. Lots of Big Ten topics I want to hit with Tom here, as there's lots of questions about this league. Tom, we appreciate you joining us here on HuskerOnline Headlines.
Hey, it's always great to speak to the Ruth and Gehrig of Nebraska Cornhuskers sports coverage, guys. I see your smiling, happy faces in this high-quality production. It's always an honor, guys.
Well, it's an honor to have you. I've been reading Tom Dienhart literally for 30 years. 30 years.
Well, Tom, lots to unpack here with you about the Big Ten. And I guess I want to start with scheduling and the pods, because this league, as we know, is going to go to 16 teams in 2024. And the divisions are presumably done. And there still could be more teams added to the Big Ten. We don't know that yet. What is, from the coaches you talk to, the sources you talk to, what is your read on what the Big Ten plans to do with kind of permanent games and how they want to schedule this thing going forward?
Like you talked about, Sean, it's been widely speculated, widely reported that the Big Ten is headed toward just a single one division format beginning in 2024 when USC and UCLA join the conference. So you just have 1 through 16, the top two teams playing in a conference championship game. So I think that's almost a foregone conclusion from what I hear from some of the coaches I talk to. And just to backtrack a little bit, guys, a couple of weeks ago, there was a big meeting in Chicago with the head coaches, with the ADs, and other Big Ten administrators. And a lot of these topics were discussed. And from the people I talked to in the rooms there too, guys, one of the biggest points of debate is deciding how many permanent opponents each team will have beginning in 2024. Now, they're still going to have 9 conference games, but are you going to have 1, 2, or 3 protected rivals each year? And the sense I got is the coaches sort of lean toward just wanting to have 1 or 2. We'll see where they end up landing. But again, that's been a big area of debate. And if you read things and talk to people who cover the SEC, they may be moving toward 9-game league schedule, but they may have 3 protected rivals too. So that's going to be a very interesting debate to watch play out here.
What is the debate? Like what is the point of contention in that topic?
I think one coach I talked to wanted 0 or 1. He just thought they needed more flexibility.
Okay.
And having these schedules. I thought, I told him, well, I think the TV networks probably want Nebraska, Ohio State, USC, all the big brands playing each other as often as they can. So again, I think it's not a huge raging debate. I think you could probably find 1 or 2 permanent opponents for each school. Who would that third opponent be for each school? Maybe you have to stretch it a little bit. They also want to make sure schools play each other twice within a 4-year period as well. So you're not off somebody's schedule for a 5 or 6-year period too.
Tom, this is more of an observation than a question, but you can comment on this from an outside perspective. This in some ways works against Nebraska because Nebraska's brand power almost works against it in that you mentioned some people would want to pair Nebraska with Ohio State and USC, which are thriving on the field, and their brand is thriving. It's not a great deal for Nebraska because they're not exactly thriving right now, right?
Yeah. But it's still that brand, Sip, and you guys know that. The struggles in Lincoln have been well documented and chronicled. I know they've turned the page again, and maybe Rule is going to be the guy who gets Nebraska back on track. But still, guys, Nebraska's Nebraska, man. That's why the Big Ten brought Nebraska in. They didn't bring Nebraska in to play Rutgers and Indiana. They brought Nebraska in to play these big brands to get big TV games.
Yep.
And so, it's just one of those unfortunate circumstances. Sorry, guys, you happen to be a popular school.
Yeah.
You happen to draw a lot of eyeballs to TV. So it is kind of a conundrum for a team like Nebraska that's still trying to really find its footing as an elite school.
Right.
Well, and Tom, conference realignment, obviously still a huge topic, mainly with the Pac-12, but even the ACC to an extent with their grant of rights agreement. But you're hearing a lot of things about Colorado, Utah, Arizona State, leaving the Pac-12 to the Big Ten, or excuse me, to the Big 12. Yeah. What does that do with Oregon, Washington, Cal, Stanford? I mean, do you get the sense that any of those teams would have a standing invite? Could they get an invite to the Big Ten on a reduced financial agreement where they're not going to get the USC UCLA deal? I mean, is there a path that these teams could be in the Big Ten sooner rather than later?
I've not really dug deep into the weeds on if they did join, if they would have to take a reduced cut of the media rights or not. But just listening to the key reporters out on the West Coast, John Canzano and John Wilner, if you listen to their podcast, those guys are as dialed into the Pac-12 as anybody. They're in Las Vegas this week for their basketball tournament. They think there's going to be some release maybe at this juncture of their upcoming TV deal. They've been kicking the can down the road with this thing for weeks, and that's got a lot of people going, what's going on here, guys? So maybe we'll get some real tangible news, an announcement on what their TV contract looks like. Some of the people may not be happy, guys, if it's got a heavy streaming component to it. The money may be good, but the exposure is not good. So there may be some unhappy customers is what I'm trying to say. And again, you hear about those four corner schools, Utah, Colorado, Arizona State, maybe coming to the Big 12. And if that happens, I think the Pac-12 is over. I think Oregon and Washington, we all know, want to come to the Big 10. I think the conference, I know Kevin Warren would have liked to have had them. How soon they could be folded in, who knows? Would that include Stanford and Cal? Possibly. I think you need some more schools out west, don't you guys, with this USC and UCLA? I think it's an inevitability, honestly, to have more of a western edge of the Big Ten at some point. For me, it just seems like it's not a matter of if, but when maybe some of this stuff starts to fall apart for the Pac-12. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, and just think about what it would do, Tom, with time zones. If you were able to control inventory in the Mountain and the Pacific time zones with marquee matchups and Pac-12 venues right now, UCLA, Oregon, USC, Washington, with the Michigan, with the Nebraska. I mean, there's a lot of value to control that inventory when you talk about those time zones.
It's huge. You're exactly right. More big time, very good academic schools too. But more inventory you spoke about, more partners out west to help with the travel and whatnot for USC and UCLA already. And then, Sean, you talked about the ACC a few minutes ago too. You guys have seen Florida State, Clemson starting to squawk. Hey, we want a bigger share of the TV pie. We bring the most eyeballs. The TV says, why does Wake Forest and Duke, why do they get the same? Why is their check as big as our check? So you can see there's already fissures there. And I don't know if they're going to have a breakup or not. You know those schools want to get out, guys, right? You know the grant of rights is till like 2036. They're doing the math. They're getting like $30 million a year less than these Big Ten and SEC schools. Florida State, Clemson, they know they can't keep up. I can't imagine they're going to sit still and let themselves fall into disarray, fall that far behind monetarily while these other schools continue to enrich themselves and to build their programs. That's going to be really interesting to see if the ACC ever does get broken up like that.
What does it mean when we talk about this, where the Florida State AD is concerned about being $30 million behind Purdue? I mean, behind Ohio State, behind Nebraska, behind SEC schools. You've covered college football for a long time, Tom. What's it mean? I mean, what do you think goes through that AD's mind when you're $30 million behind in a media rights deal?
I'd be panicked.
Would you?
Your salaries, facilities, who knows where we're going to go with pay for play, maybe.
Yeah.
With compensating players. I mean, my head would be spinning if I was an AD at Florida State or Clemson or Miami or even North Carolina and Virginia. I think those schools, especially North Carolina, we all know is a very attractive school that the Big Ten or the SEC would love to have. So you name it. I mean, without that big chunk of money, your infrastructure, your facilities, not to mention, I talked about the personnel and the staff, the shortfalls you would have there to be able to keep up with these other schools. So it's got to be a real concern for those conferences, I would think, moving forward if they can't keep up dollar-wise.
Sure.
As we wrap it up with Tom Dienhart, I got to ask you too about Ryan Walters. You're one of the few that's right there in West Lafayette covering that team daily. What is your early read on this coaching change? I mean, you're looking at the final year of the Big Ten West, and we were talking about this the other day. It's as wide open of a year heading into the West as you're ever going to see. With Wisconsin changing coaches, Nebraska changing coaches, Iowa bringing in a new quarterback, Purdue, Illinois obviously had a great year. I mean, this West is wide open in what's going to be the final year to win the West Division.
Yeah, don't forget about Minnesota, right? Flex always seems like he's in it too. And you're right. Ryan Walters, I spent about an hour with him yesterday
Man.
Up in his office, we went over, man, I went from childhood to current day, got about a lot of really gritty, very emotional details of his life, some of the things he went through in college, some real personal matters. But again, a young guy, there's a lot of energy here, guys. It's such a contrast. It is that proverbial 180 from the Brom era to the Walters era from a vibe standpoint. These guys are all over social media. Brom's guys kind of eschew social media for the most part. These guys are dancing on Twitter. Ryan Walters sends out these videos Jack Brom would never have dreamed of sending out. I'm not saying one way is right or one way is wrong. It's just different, right? It seems to connect with the kids. The players are very happy. They're doing all they can to amp up their NIL game, guys. It's not anywhere near where Nebraska's is, but Ryan Walters gets it. He's 36 years old. He understands the importance of making sure NIL works. And he's going to do all he can to make sure Purdue can at least try to keep up and stay in the game with some of the big-time programs in the Big Ten.
Tom, do you still do the Big Ten evaluation, the Big Ten prognostications for, is it Lindy's?
Yeah, for Lindy's, yeah.
You still do that?
Yeah, I at the Big Ten. I started looking like the schedule, Sip, and not to keep on Purdue here, but their schedule may be as tough as anybody's in the Big Ten next year. Check this out.
Okay.
They opened with Fresno State at home, which won 10 games last year, coached by Jeff Tedford. They got other non-conference games against Syracuse and at Virginia Tech. Ohio State and Michigan on the schedule now this year's crossover, guys. And, of course, you always have, Nebraska, Iowa, and Wisconsin. So, again, non-conference-wise, just that, Fresno State, Syracuse, Virginia Tech. I don't think any other Big Ten school probably plays 3 Power 5 schools. Or Fresno's not, but at least 2 Power 5 schools in the non-conference. Plus, Fresno State's a very good group of 5 schools, we all know.
Yeah, I got to tell you,
right there.
I got to tell you, I read your preseason stuff closer than anybody's because I trust you. So do a good job on that stuff, Tom.
Who's your pick in the West right now, Tom?
I am. Hey, I always send an email to you. I know, Sip. Off that, I mean, Sean, off to send you, Sip. I always ask Sean every year. So how do you see the West playing out? So I usually will canvass a few writers just to get their view too, because you can always default to Wisconsin, right? I have I haven't even thought about who to pick in the West. Who do you guys think? I mean, I have no idea.
I think the crossovers is going to be the deciding factor. Like, who's going to be able to get 2 or 3 wins on their Eastern crossover schedule? I mean, that's probably
that's a good point.
I mean, and that's probably where the division's going to get. And Nebraska had that schedule last year. They had Indiana and Rutgers as crossover games, and they were able to win those 2 games. But if you can get 2 of your 3 crossover games, you're going to be in good shape in the West.
I think Nebraska plays Michigan this year still, don't they?
Yeah.
That's one year.
Michigan State, and Maryland.
It's pretty tough.
That's pretty tough.
They got 3 pretty tough crossover games.
That is tough. I really haven't dug really deep into that aspect of the schedules just yet, the crossover opponents. But I think you're right, Sean. That's going to be a big determining factor. Hey, real quick before I go, one other interesting topic I'm going to write about probably next week that came out of that Big Ten meeting a couple of weeks ago was that I talked to Sean off camera about this last week. They're kicking around the idea of having a Big Ten officiating command center. If you can believe it, the Big Ten is the only Power 5 conference that does not have an officiating command center off-site that is involved in penalty reviews. ACC does, SEC, Big 12, and the Pac-12. They go back to Birmingham. They go back to San Francisco. They go back to Greensboro. They help them They help them overview these official calls. And the Big Ten's really thinking about finally making that plunge. Imagine it would be in Chicago, right? And anytime there's a penalty review, Chicago would be involved in helping make the decision, sorting it out.
You mean that's live? I mean, during the game or?
Just like a Major League Baseball does. You see those guys that their people in New York are helping to sort that out in New York. It's up in New York City. So the Big Ten's the only conference, the only power conference that doesn't have an off-site officiating command center. So that'd be interesting to see if it happens. It sounds like they may be moving toward that, but that was one of the other bigger, I think, things that really came out of that. And guys, I had 2 coaches tell me I don't think it's going to happen. But they've even discussed getting rid of the Big Ten championship game.
Whoa!
That's the coaches. I don't think it's ever going to happen because of the money. I think they worry about another hurdle. We all know it's another hurdle to get a playoff bid. Now I think going to a 12-team playoff, losing the Big Ten title game probably isn't going to be as detrimental as it has been with just a 4-team playoff. But I thought it was very interesting when I heard that they even brought that up and discussed it.
There's just no way the league's going to give up 70,000 tickets to sell to that game, along with the television revenue. There's just, in the city of Indianapolis, I mean, there's just too much there for them to walk away from a championship game.
Other than money, what's the value? Not the money's got a lot of value, right?
One, Tom Osborne was the very first proponent of conference title games back when the Big 12 formed. He was the one guy that voted against the Big 12 title game because he said back then there will be a year where this costs one of our teams to go to the national championship. And
but you don't think it will now with the 12
No, it won't now. You're right. With 12
you're probably still going to get an at-large bid, right? If you lose the game.
My fear, though, this is my fear, is you could have an Ohio State, Michigan rematch back-to-back weeks.
You think that's that bad, though? People always talk about that. Is that bad of a thing? I'd still watch.
Yeah, but I'd still watch. If you're one of the participants, though, that's what you think about.
I got you.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how coaches would look at that. I mean, I'm not talking about coaches at other schools. I'm talking about coaches at those schools. What would they say about it? Do the kids care? I don't know that the kids would care that much.
Fans would love it.
Yeah.
What if they played in the playoffs, though, too? That'd be 3 games.
That'd be something.
I mean, Nebraska played Washington 3 times, and they played them twice in a season. They played them 3 times in 12 months.
Yeah, that was ridiculous, too. That was ridiculous.
But, hey, Tom, we could talk all day. We're going to have you on again, though. We appreciate you stepping into Headlines with us.
You bet. Anytime, guys, and I know I'll probably see. I'm guessing it's going to be in Indianapolis in July. It is. So it's always fun. You know how much I love seeing you guys, and I appreciate your time and your insight and your expertise and your friendship.
Thank you, Tom. That's nice of you. Back at you.
Thanks again to Tom Dienhart.